Hi, I'm Cheryl Alters Jamison. I'm a local cookbook author. I live here in Tasuke, and we're out here by my grill. It's one of the hottest days of the summer. That's okay, though, because we're making ribs, and who doesn't love that? Now, I have written about ribs and, well, all kinds of foods from the American Southwest, a lot of things about New Mexico, but I'm focused today on a recipe that is from my newest book, which is called Texas Q, about the great world of Texas barbecue. It's kind of a follow-up of a book from, oh gosh, 25 years back called Smoke and Spice, which was sort of the first time I addressed barbecue in print, and I have loved it since before that time and ever since. I'm going to show you how to make a rack of pork spare ribs today, and we're going to use spare ribs as opposed to baby backs. I think that spare ribs have a little more flavor to them. You can find both around pretty readily. Baby backs, sometimes people think those are more tender and that they come from younger pigs. That is not the case. They're just from farther up on the ribs, and I think that the lower ribs have better marbling, and so that's going to give them better flavor. So that's what we have here is a rack of spare ribs, and they're cut in something called St. Louis style, and that refers to the fact that something called the chine bone has been cut off of them and any flaps and such, and so we end up with this very nice even rib rack, which means it's going to cook very evenly when we put it on the grill too. Now I am going to really barbecue these ribs or smoke them but I'm going to use my grill rather than a smoker. Now I have tons of smokers around this patio. I have all kinds of equipment that I can do low, slow smoking on. But because not everybody has access to that, I thought I would use a gas grill today to show you how anybody can do these with any kind of grill. I'm using a gas grill, but you could use a charcoal grill. I'm going to add wood to that because that's the thing that makes it real barbecue. We have to have some wood and then also low, slow temperatures. And I'm going to show you that in just a few minutes. But there's one other tip I wanted to tell you about before you actually get into flavoring your ribs for the grill. Okay, we're going to turn it over, and on this back side there is a membrane. It's kind of thin, and it runs basically the length of the ribs, and we're going to pull that off. And the reason we do that is because once we get that off of the pork ribs, then the flavorings that we're going to put on in the form of a dry spice rub are going to have a chance to sink in even more to the ribs. And we'll just use our knife on that and pull this away. So the next thing we want to do is flavor our ribs. We've picked out the good cut of pork, so it's going to have lots of natural flavor to it, but we want to enhance that with something called a dry rub or a dry spice rub. Now, this is the best way to get big, bold flavor rather quickly. Marinades are one of the other flavoring techniques that people use a lot for outdoor foods and such, and that's a fine technique for certain things, but because of the amount of liquid in it, the flavor is somewhat muted, and we want to go for the boldest, biggest flavor for our ribs. And what we're doing is making a mixture of just some fairly common kitchen spices. I have here some kosher salt, some coarse black pepper, some paprika. I have a little bit of cayenne, but you could also use some New Mexican red chili, of course. And then there's also a little bit of garlic powder. And let's see, we have some brown sugar. And then I also have what's called turbinado sugar. It's sometimes referred to as sugar in the raw, and it's coarse textured. And the reason I like that is because it kind of keeps that texture once it's mixed up together with these other spices. And you can find all kinds of commercial dry rub mixtures, and if you have one that you really like, well, that's fine, but it's really easy to mix up your own. And what I advise too is that if it's something you think you want to make over the course of, say, the summer or maybe into the fall, just make a big batch of it all at once, and then you've got it ready to go. So then you take your mixture and just sprinkle this over. Rub it down, and we want a good, pretty thorough coat of spices on it. In this dry spice rub mixture, I like to use a lot of black pepper. And in this case, there's about 3 tablespoons worth of black pepper, and then about 2 tablespoons of the 2 sugars together, the brown sugar and the turbinado sugar, and then about 1 tablespoon of salt in this. So proportionately, I've got 3 times as much pepper as salt here. And then I just have small amounts of dry mustard and paprika and garlic. And those are kind of the background flavors in this. Okay. And see, we want this big, nice coating. Turn it over here. And if you've gone to the effort of removing that membrane on this back side, this spice mixture is going to absorb and soak in even better. And that's all there is to flavoring it. Next, we're going to go to putting it on the grill with some wood. Okay, we're working with our grill in a slightly different technique than when we're like cooking burgers on it, for example. In this case, we want to use indirect lower heat in the range of about 250 degrees instead of very high heat. And then the other thing that we need to do these ribs properly is some wood for smoke. And for a gas grill, one of the easiest things is to acquire a little smoker tube, something like this. I mean, you can use little boxes. You can even use foil that you've poked holes into. But you need some wood chunks or chips of some kind. And I particularly like this little tool. And you just fill it up with your wood chunks. And you can use different woods as you choose. Because I have cherry trees here in my courtyard, I often use cherry trimmings. You want to use something that's unsprayed. But when you are buying at a supermarket or a hardware store or a dedicated grill store, you'll probably come across hickory and mesquite and those are the most common, but oak is pretty common too. All of those are acceptable. My ribs today are a little bit inspired by East Texas, and that's an area where hickory is noted. And so I'm using hickory in my ribs today. Now what I'm doing to get the temperature that I want it to be about 250 degrees, as I said, and I have a little thermometer that is over at this end of my grill, and this is actually the end at which I'm going to cook the ribs. But what I've done is put my fire over at this end. So this is the very hot end. That'd be where I'd grill burgers if I was going to do that. But we want to slow smoke the ribs. So what I'm going to do is, okay, this 1/3 of the grill has the high heat. I'm going to put our wood right to the edge of that. So it's going to catch from the fire down below, but it's going to kind of smolder and smoke for us as opposed to go into a raging conflagration of flames. And then we're going to take the rack of ribs and put them down at this end. I just want to lay them all the way out straight there. And this is my end that is 250 degrees. So somewhere in the range of 225 to 250 is what you want. And then we're just going to let those cook for a little bit. I'm going to add one other flavoring technique to them because you might get the idea. We're going for layers and layers of flavor on this. And I'm going to just spritz a little bit of vinegar and Worcestershire sauce. And that it's going to give a little bit of acid that's really good with all that fat that the pork has. Okay, we've got our wood over here. We've got our ribs in place. We're going to let the wood and the heat do their magic now. All right, we're back at the table now with our ribs. And we can start pretty much any place we want and slice through those. Let's start down at this end. Ooh. Got a little bit of fat here, but not too much. Most of it's internal for the ribs. So, all right, that is how you smoke a great rack of spare ribs. Don't forget to visit me at my website, excitedaboutfood.com, because that's what I always am, and I hope you will be too. And keep fired up for smoking.